moving on to the next step in the secondary growth, we are going to understand what are annual rings and how they are formed. Now, you must have seen, if by chance you have seen a wooden log or a big tree trunk cut, or in the drawings and at other places, you must have observed that if we have a wooden log like this, it has been cut like this. In the diagrammatic representation or pictorial presentations, you must have seen that there are concentric rings which are formed inside the trunk of a tree. Now, these concentric rings are formed as a result of secondary growth only. This is not some pattern that is showing the creativity of the plant, or some drawing pattern just to make it look beautiful. There is entire logic behind and science behind these rings, how they are formed. Now, because there is a logic behind it, let's find what it is. The logic lies in the secondary growth only. Now, because we are dealing with the growth, and whenever we talk about growth, if you can recall from your knowledge about growth from the previous classes, there are two factors which are responsible for growth in any organism. Okay, it could be any organism, animal, plant, simple protozoan, or simply any organism. There are two factors. First factor is the physiological factor which plays its role in growth of a plant, and the second factor is the environment in which the organism is located. Talking about the plants, it is the physiology of the plant that plays an important role. That is what it is taking up, what is the internal condition of the plant, and the second is the environmental factors which play a role in growth of a plant. Now, the secondary growth has to do its major role in growth of trees. So, what we come across is, because tree is having a long lifespan, we consider it in annual terms. Now, when I am taking such a large stretch of time, I am considering 2 seasons. Broadly speaking, we have 2 seasons. Now, what are those 2 seasons? One season will be, if we are talking about temperate climate plants, one season would be when there will be a lot of plant growth, and the other would be when the growth would be highly reduced. Now, I am talking about 2 seasons. One would be fall and other would be spring season, to be very specific, or you can say one would be winters and other would be summers. Now, for understanding purpose, you can relate it that in summers and in spring season, the plant grows profusely. There are many leaves on the plant. So, for meeting that requirement, the formation of xylem is quite rapid. And in the case of winters, you know that most of the plants, they shed their leaves. Water requirement is less, and the physiological activities would also decline. So, you can see the relation between these two factors. When the environment is favorable, that is, the conditions or the climatic conditions are favorable, which is almost moderate climate, the environment is favorable, so the physiological activity would be greater. And for a greater physiological activity, the plant is going to need more of its vascular bundles. So, the formation of xylem is much rapid. The xylem is formed. The xylem that is formed is having larger diameter and thinner walls. Now, because it is having thinner walls, it is lighter in color. Okay. Xylem with larger diameter, thinner walls and lighter in color would be formed when the climate is moderate, or I would say, let's take the time to be spring. Okay. In the opposite conditions, when the climate is not moderate, it is extreme, let's say it's winter, so the environment is not favorable. When the environment goes unfavorable, the physiological functions are reduced. When they are reduced, the xylem which would be formed will not have greater diameter, because of which its walls would be thicker. It is going to store some sort of tannins in it, and it will be darker in color. Okay. Now, I am taking this period when the conditions are not favorable, they are not moderate, as autumn. And not just me, all authors take it that way. So, we have 2 types of woods. Because we are primarily concerned with xylem over here, and xylem is otherwise known as wood. All the furniture that you have in your houses is made up of wood, and that wood is nothing but that plant tissue which we call as xylem. So we have two types of woods which are formed, and because xylem is wood, and because we discussed that in cambial rings activity it is xylem which is formed more profusely, so the woods, two types of woods are formed. One is autumn wood and other one is spring wood, okay, within a plant itself. Now because 1 year comprises of these two seasons, it is bound to happen that you're going to find a darker ring of xylem, because we know that whatever formation is taking place, that is taking place by the activity of cambial ring. Cambial ring is adding xylem lighter in color, then it is adding xylem darker in color, then again it is adding xylem that is lighter in color, again it is adding xylem that is lighter in color. So in this way we are going to find concentric rings with different colors. So we have a dark region, then we have a lighter region, then we have a dark region, that is autumn wood, then we have a lighter region, that is a spring wood, then again autumn and spring. In this way, the first representation where I represented that a cut wood tree trunk looks like this, where you have concentric rings. This is formed because of the activity of the cambial ring, and these rings are known as annual rings, and one ring comprises of both autumn wood and spring wood, okay. That is what we have to discuss, that there is autumn wood as well as spring wood that is present. This spring wood is otherwise known as early wood, and this autumn wood is known as late wood. So this you have to remember, that two types of woods are present, and two rings comprise one annual ring, okay. And from the annual rings we can identify how much lifespan the tree has witnessed being alive, and we come to know how much cambial growth has taken place. So this is all about annual rings. Now we are done with the internal growth. In the next lesson what we are going to understand is what happens to those parts of the stem which lie outside to the phloem. Pith was crushed, primary xylem was crushed, secondary phloem was crushed, but what about that huge cortex, that cortical layers that were present, what happens to that, and why do trees have that that suberized part known as bark? What is that, if we have to understand it anatomically? And because the size is increasing from inside, how does the outer epidermal layer and the layers which are in close contact with the epidermis, how do they accommodate such an increase in size? So for that, again I would say watch the next video.